And codes to keep the online social media space safe. Authorities draw up new rules that could put the onus on giants like Facebook and TikTok to remove harmful content.
And more on this, Dr. Carol Soon, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies and Vice Chair of the Media Literacy Council, joins us now. As my colleague just mentioned, the onus being put on social media giants themselves. If I look at these new codes of practice, it's not just that, it's also the onus being put on users. So, for example, if you are that unhappy with any one post, speak up, report it, get this done with social media giants who are also now being forced to take greater responsibility to respond to these reports of dissatisfaction. Would you sum up, this is what this new code is all about?
So there are actually two codes in question, and you're quite right to say that a fair bit of the responsibility will be placed on users as well as social media services. So if you look at the first code, which is the Code of Practice for Online Safety, quite a bit of emphasis is placed on social media services having to ensure and protect users from online harms by putting in force their community standards and doing content moderation. Also, there are requirements for social media services to enhance ease of user reporting. So here we're talking about empowering users to take action when they come across online harms. And finally, of course, there is an emphasis on promoting greater accountability on the part of social media services. So the Code of Practice for Online Safety will actually look into getting social media services to produce annual accountability reports so that users would know where maybe each social media service stands. Then the other code, which is the Content Code for Social Media Services, essentially gives a government authority, in particular the IMDA, the power to direct social media services to protect users in a couple of ways. One of which is they can actually direct social media services to disable access to specific harmful content, and the other being giving it the power to disallow specific accounts to communicate content or to interact with users based in Singapore. So these are some of the provisions that have been laid out in the draft codes, and the government has said that it will call for public consultation in the coming month.
Dr. Soon, you mentioned in the last few points that government authorities can direct what social media platforms do. I take it this is already in place. Am I right or am I wrong there?
No, you're right. If we look at some of the things that the courts are requiring social media services to do once they are passed, some of the things are not new. So, for instance, community standards or takedown, social media services have been doing that in past years. They have been removing accounts that publish posts that has to do with extremist violence, violent extremism, hate speech, child pornography, for instance. But what these codes essentially do is to make it mandatory for social media services to take greater responsibility in promoting a safe space for the users. And of course, when codified into law, the codes will actually enable authorities to take the requisite action against social media services who do not do what's required. I personally think that there is another...
All right,
yes.
Please continue very quickly. Please wrap up.
Very quickly, I think, yes, sure. So I think the codes will actually hopefully lead to greater coherence among different social media services which might have different standards.
Okay, that is a problem I have with this. We want coherence in regulation. But for example, if you ask people to say, write in reports to complain about things they're not happy with, what one person finds offensive, another person might not find offensive at all. Or the government might say, you know what, we think that's okay, but individuals might not agree with that. So who makes that call here? In the past, if authorities make that call, you may not agree with them, but at least they're transparent, they're accountable. If all of us are complaining, each one on one point or another, who makes that call? How do we ensure that standards are coherent and enforced?
I think that's a really important question. So when we talk about definitions, it's always a very, very tricky part. There will be people who find, say, the definition of online harms too narrow, and there will be people who find that the definition of online harms are too broad. So really, we are unlikely to arrive at a definition that will work for everyone. So what we hope to do is perhaps through the consultation exercises and through the conversations that government authorities are having with different stakeholders, including social media services themselves, we hope to arrive at the definition that would work for most people in the Singapore context.
So, of course, as you suggested in your previous answer, now these codes of practice will have the force of law similar to existing codes currently administered by, also, as you mentioned, the Infocom Media Development Authority. Now, as from just a code to just a law that can be enforced, there are some things that these regulations cannot get wrong. Very quickly, what are those things that we need to be very careful of?
I think we need to be very careful of, number one, like what I said, the definition, and also in terms of operations, we need to look at the time frame that have to be given to social media services to do what they need to do, whether it's to take down the content, disable access. So these are things that we have to think about, and we can learn a thing or two from other countries that are also looking into similar codes.
Thanks so much for sharing all those insights, Dr. Carol Soon, Senior Research Fellow, Institute of Policy Studies.